Rich Walkoff here at Media One Studios in San Francisco, and we're talking with Catt Tripoli, who is a bodybuilder, not only a bodybuilder, a former Miss America, Miss Universe, and Miss International, also an author of the Conscious Fitness, Strength Training for Evolution of the Mind, Body, and Spirit. Quite an accomplished background you have, Miss Catt.
Thank you.
And welcome to our show here today. So we're talking about the Sports Energy and Consciousness Festival that you were at last year. Can you just share with us some of the takeaways, because you've been immersed in trying to enhance strength conditioning training for a lifetime, and you go to a festival which talks about things that transcend pure strength or the body alone. A lot of it is the mind, the spirit, and the consciousness and the energy. So talk a little bit about some of your experiences from last year, if you would.
Well, honestly, when I heard about this, it was the perfect fit. The book was just getting ready to be released, and look at the title, Conscious Fitness. This isn't just about fitness. This is about fitness overall. And we're coming to that through the body, which in my opinion is the slowest vibration of all the bodies. So if we can get that in line, then we can bring everything else up with it, all the other bodies with it. This is a way in to higher consciousness, to spirituality, through something that we all know and can feel, right? This is something that we can all come to. We've all got a body. I mentioned that in the conference last year. We've all got a body. We can all start there. I had to come into it that way, into spirituality through the body. And meeting all these people at the SEC group itself, who were on the forefront of this type of thing, this research, and coming together and feeling the synergy of all that was not only incredible, it was validating for what I had just written. Because that book was a difficult thing to write, because I'm like, how am I going to make people understand what I'm trying to say here? Because I thought I was the only one, right? Especially when you're immersed in the world of iron.
Right, bodybuilding.
There's not a lot of consciousness raising things there. So this was great because, talking to David and talking to David Megacy and Barry Robbins and all these people who were having the same experiences I had. Now what we're trying to do is find a common language to get this across to people.
What is conscious fitness to you?
Conscious fitness is moving the body in a brand new way. For me, it started as a bodybuilder trying to create a muscle shape, not just lift weights, very, very different. Powerlifting and bodybuilding and Olympic lifting are all very different sports. Bodybuilding, the weight is somewhat irrelevant. We're trying to shape the muscles. It's more sculpting. It's more bioart. And that was something I really wanted to get deeply into. It's one of the reasons why I train alone. I don't want to be pulled outside of myself. So that sculpting required a really high level of focus, a high level of concentration into the fibers themselves and how to move exactly where I wanted to move without endangering the tendons or ligaments at either end of the muscle. To make that bigger, to make it grow consciously, took tremendous amounts of concentration.
So more science.
Oh, science. It was more intuitive for me. It was very intuitive. I learned along the way as I went, techniques, ideas. There were some ideas that were out there, but not a lot. It was more a felt sense of what was working and what wasn't. Because our goal is really to tear down the muscle a little bit so that it repairs itself a little bit larger. So my feedback was soreness in the muscle without aches and pains in the joint. Does that make sense? A little bit? Yeah. So that's what it was about for me. And to shut out the world around you so that you had more ability to concentrate on exactly what you were doing. Your mind doesn't know, your body doesn't know, the number that's on the end of that weight. The number that's on the end of that dumbbell if it's 95 pounds or 5 pounds. It doesn't know. Your brain knows. So we create a whole story around that 5 pounds or that 95 pounds, don't we? So what I was doing was making 5 pounds feel like 95 by making only the fibers that I wanted to move. When you do things like powerlifting, when you do things like Olympic lifting or CrossFit, it's more of a concert of muscles. What I'm trying to do is a solo. So if I want to create my biceps to be bigger, I want to quiet the deltoid. I want to quiet the tendon. I want to quiet the forearm and only use the bicep. That's a hard thing to do.
You're talking about isolating a specific body part, muscle, to engage, activate, enhance. But you're kind of a pioneer. Were a lot of women involved in this half a lifetime ago for you when you began this quest to become the best bodybuilder in the world of what you do in the female world?
There weren't a lot of us. There really weren't. My first foray into lifting weights was in the back of a Formica countertop fabricating shop where the guys had built a homemade bench and they had some weights. And this is a true story. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they would pop a beer and go to the after work and go to the back of the shop and lift weights. That's how I started. I was a secretary there, and they said, "Come on back in the back." And I was like, "I'm not going to go lift weights with those guys." And I started there, and I fell in love with it. At that time, there weren't a lot of women. The first gym I started working out in decided to go co-ed, and it was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday was men's days, and Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday was women's. They were closed on Sunday. That's how long ago this was. Now it's exploded. It's really exploded. You know, people are learning the benefits of strength training, and not just for the body, but for the mind and for the brain. You know, everything just is beneficial.
Now, you've worked with Native American, I don't know if we can characterize it as sort of like the spiritual leaders or the medicine men of the tribes or whatnot, but getting into a hypnotherapeutic approach to lifting, or I might put it in your words.
Well, I'll tell you, everything was very serendipitous. It all kind of came together to gel into this book, because when I started training with my spiritual teachers in New Mexico, they started talking about how the different bodies that we have, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, right? All these bodies have their own personalities. They all have different needs and different wants. That really was eye-opening for me. That was like coming into bodybuilding with that attitude was amazing. And I realized I was sort of doing that all along. I just didn't know it. And the same thing happened with hypnosis. I actually went into hypnosis in 1986 to get better at my stage presence. And I started there. And it was such a profound, such a profound experience that years later, I decided that I should try to become a hypnotherapist. When I did that, I really realized that this state of mind, this relaxed state of mind, is what I had been doing, again, all along in my lifting. I just didn't know that I was hypnotizing myself. And that was, again, eye-opening to where that I could start doing that with my clients, and they don't even know they're in that state. So I think the difference in what I do versus many people in this iron game do is that they seem to push their energy outward. They're yelling, they're screaming, they're focused on the mirror, they're all over the place, right? For me, it's very internal. It's very quiet. Even in the noise and the din of the gym, it's how am I relating to that muscle? How am I requesting? What am I requesting? Am I clear in my requests of my body? And that in turn translates to what I do after the workout. What do I put in my body? Is that conscious eating? Is that helping to support all the effort that I just put into the gym? I look for color. You know, am I eating antioxidants? Am I eating from the earth in its most natural form? All those things came from these different modalities. My teachers, my native teachers, taught us to notice everything, because everything is part of this web of life. There is nothing that is incidental. And so when you bring that attitude into the gym, it's a whole different game. It's an absolutely different game.
That's fascinating. So it's sort of a primordial, intuitive, back to the earth or nature, spiritual connection that you had with your path.
Very much so. It was an incredible, incredible spiritual connection. I was raised in a fundamentalist cult. Very much unplugging you from waiting for the next thing, waiting for the new world to come. Just doing the bare minimum. Isolation, dogma, right? When I left that cult, when I was able to leave at 17, it took me a couple of years to break away entirely, but when I did, the next step for me was rampant atheism. Rampant nihilism, atheism. There is no God. There is nothing else but this thing. We just got to get through it. Years later, it was something's missing. Something is absolutely missing. Why do I feel so empty? I came to quantum physics, started reading about quantum physics. Quantum physics says there's nothing but possibility in empty space. So you can do whatever you want to do. So that almost comes around to the martial arts, doesn't it? That the mind is the most important tool we have. So through that, I kind of came into the back door of spirituality and consciousness through science. And look where we are in this group, in this SEC group. So it opened up a door to the divine, to divinity via science. That this is all huge. And I can mold, I can create, I can live as long as I want. All those things became possibilities for me. And when you work without limitation, there's limitation. You're thinking, but you expand that boundary. And you're able to keep things a lot differently than you did before. You're able to do things you couldn't do before. One of the biggest ways of describing this is when I was in my 20s, I always heard that you stop at some point. Oh, you're going to have to cut back as you get older. You know, things are going to change. You're going to have to do this. You won't be able to do that. You know, and I thought, why? Is there some point when I'm lifting weights and I hit 60 that all of a sudden I can't lift what I was lifting before the next day? When does that happen? How does that happen? So I just was determined that it wasn't going to. And I kept going. And I thought, well, if the boundaries are there, what we tell ourselves is where we stop.
Go back to the quantum physics and how it played into the illumination for you.
Oh, I think one of the first books I read was Gary Zukav and the Dancing Wooly Masters. It was a fabulous book. And things, like I said, if you can take two particles, split them apart, separate them by 14 miles, and change the direction of the spin of one particle and have the other particle change its spin at the same moment, separated by 14 miles, what does that open up for you? That's a world what is that field of communication? What is that? That blew everything wide open for me. That allowed me to play. That allowed me to destroy boundaries of time, of space, of what I could and couldn't do. Now, are we limited by our physics? Yeah. I'm not going to step out in front of a bus, but there are things that I can control, and it's absolutely paid off by having a different mindset. I mean, most of what I've done, if you read the ending of my book, I think I said if you'd have told me in my 20s that I'd be a world champion bodybuilder, I'd have said you were crazy. If you told me in my 30s that I'd open 4 gyms, I'd said there's no way. I quit school at 15. If you told me in my 40s that I was going to write a book, I'd say it's impossible. But yet we keep doing those things because I didn't limit myself.
Talk about that path to the triumphs. Which came first? The Miss America bodybuilder, Miss Universe? I guess you'd have to win the national competition before you won the international competition.
Here's the interesting thing about bodybuilding is that, it's been around for a long time. Women's bodybuilding since the late 70s. But back then, when Weeders had control over it, they really were instrumental in bringing this whole thing up. Back then, you had to qualify to even go to nationals. And if you won nationals, not went and competed, then you were allowed to go to the Universe, which is the top of the amateurs. That's the world amateur competition. If you won the amateurs, then you could turn pro. And then you could compete as a professional. Now, completely different. So I was actually in it when it was at its pinnacle, when it was the best. People were you would go to nationals, and there'd be 140 women competing in bodybuilding. So you could go home, you could get cut without ever having hit one pose if you weren't that good. So what happened with me is I came up through the amateurs, through the little local shows, right down in Marin, the North Bay, things like that, and then went to the Cal. California State was the biggest, probably still is, the biggest state competition there is. Won that. The second year I did it, not the first year, but the second year I did it. Won that. Then that qualified me to go to nationals in USA, and won those second year. And then went to the Universe and won that in Singapore in 1986, and then turned pro. And that was the progression.
When I say it's subjective, I mean, one judge might say, wow, she's the best because of such and such. Others might think, oh, no way. I mean, it's an art form. It's not a science. It's not who can lift the most.
This is something I talk about all the time in the gym, and people, local amateur competitors that are frustrated because they didn't win. Oh, I was bigger than that guy. I was harder than that guy. The thing about bodybuilding is how do I say that? It's not a sport in the true sense of the word. What we do in the gym is a sport. But once I step on stage, there's no tape measure, there's no time clock, right? There's nothing. Even in ice skating, everybody knows what a triple sow cow should look like, okay? In bodybuilding, there isn't any of that. And so I really do believe that once you're on stage, it's a sport. It's art. It is definitely art. It's sculpting, how you come across, all of that. So it's a little frustrating, really, in a way, to compete in bodybuilding, because there really isn't criteria to hold you to a certain standard. There are 3 rounds of judging. There's symmetry. Well, what is symmetry? Does that mean my thigh is as big as my waist? Does that mean my bicep is the size of my forearm? What does that mean? Then there's posing, which, again, what is that? What does that mean? Presentation, how well you present it. Then there's muscularity. What is that? How big my muscles are? Well, then bring a tape measure out and let's measure and see who wins. But the thing about bodybuilding is you can have somebody who's got incredible measurements. Let's say a 17-inch arm or an 18-inch arm, that's incredible. Put them all together on stage and it looks like somebody threw muscle at them. It's not pretty. It doesn't fit together well. So it's really very strange. It's more of an art form when you're up there. It's a sport in the gym and it's art when you're up there. If you think about it, it is the only sport where what we practice isn't what we do. Right? If you're an ice skater, if you play football, if you play basketball, what you practice is what you do to compete, not us.
You have to lift to make a good pose.
Yeah.
And it's all about the pose.
Exactly. It's
that,
all about
that
the body.
determines whether you're getting the thumbs up and the high score or not. What about the mental preparation to get in the gym to create the body you want? Because that is a fascinating storyline. You talked about isolation of I'm working on my biceps or my quads or whatever. But expound a little more about how you achieved that the ultimate height. I mean, you were the best in the world at what you did for a female for a long time.
The art of isolation, I think, is a little bit more honed in me than it is in a lot of bodybuilders. What I try telling them is once you're on stage, it's an illusion. It really is an illusion, including, including how you project, how you push yourself out there, what story you tell the audience, believe it or not, just in those poses, and how it's about hiding your flaws and showing off your best qualities. And muscle isolation creates separation between the muscle groups. That can look bigger without the benefit of size, if that makes sense. So if I have a bicep that is clearly different than the tricep, is clearly different than the shoulder, I can create the illusion of much more size. I'll tell you a little story that was really funny in the USA. I was a heavyweight, believe it or not. Back in those days, there were 4 divisions: light, middle, light heavy, and heavy. And I was a heavyweight. I'm 5'5". Okay? There were women in there 6 feet tall and above that outweighed me by 30 pounds. And in a lineup of 140 some odd women, how do you stand out? So what the judges told me was that the more you pose, the bigger you got. Right? That was a direct quote. The winner of the lightweight, the winner of the middleweight, the winner of the light heavy, and myself, the heavyweight winner, were backstage getting ready to come on to compete for the overall title. The expediter, I'm in my sweats, the expediter says, okay, I got my lightweight, my middleweight, where's the heavyweight? And I'm standing right in front of her, so I'm right here. She goes, no, the heavyweight. That's me. She goes, no, that big girl. That's me. So the illusion was, as I stood on stage, that I was 5'9". The illusion was I was a big, muscular woman. But in those clothes, she couldn't tell. So that's bodybuilding in a nutshell. It's like, it doesn't mean that you've got a 17-inch bicep. I've seen people that I thought we call them gym bodies. Wow, he's gonna just go crazy on stage. He's gonna do really well. And they get up there and you go, doesn't look as good. So it's a really interesting thing. So that's why I think some of this field of connection matters when you're on stage. How do you project? And that's where the hypnosis came in for me. How are you projecting out? And it's not just a smile, and it's not just a bicep shot. There's something else. And it's that focused concentration, that having fun. Arnold had it. Arnold wasn't the best bodybuilder up there all the time, but he kept winning. And he kept winning because of his projection. And it's not even arrogance. That's not it either. Because I've seen a lot of bodybuilders get very arrogant. They don't win. So there's something else that you project out there. Because if you're running, you ran a 4.4 or whatever, can't beat that. You can't argue that. But bodybuilding, totally different. Completely different.
So
May I interrupt one second? Would you like some water?
Yes,
Let me get you
please.
some.
I think I've got some right here, I think.
Oh, do you?
Yeah,
This one
sorry.
here?
Mm-hmm. These allergies, it's like the
Yeah.
pollen.
Oh, this time of year must be lovely.
Do you
for
need anything at all?
I'm good, thank you.
I don't sneeze, but my voice goes.
Yeah, you got a little raspy. That's better?
Better.
Good, good.
Just
Thank
ask for
you.
more if you want some.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
We good?
Yeah.
So it sounds like the accentuating your life force, your energy, your charisma,
Yes.
how you show and glow and flow will all play into how you're perceived, how you project. Integral to the performance art that you're on stage.
Absolutely. It's the only way that you can do it. I don't care if you've got a great body. If you get up there and you don't know how to connect with the audience and you don't know how to show it, you won't be as successful. You can get to a level, but you won't go all the way. And it happened in, like I said, in 1986. I'd been competing through some of the tougher shows in 85. And my husband at the time said, you know, when you're up there, you look like you're having a great time. You're having so much fun. And I'm basically shy, so that was weird. But he said, you look like you're having a great time, but you know, you don't look like a winner. And he said, backstage, we can always pick out the winners. I said, yeah, I know. And I sought out someone who did hypnosis. Intuitively, I don't know why, but intuitively. And he worked with me with hypnosis for stage presence. What he did was he dug up why I might be holding back. What was in my subconscious that might be holding me back, that might be keeping me from shining. And we worked with that through hypnosis. And I'll never forget, he said, the minute you put that first foot on stage, you're going to feel like a winner. And I'd completely forgotten about that. It was at the Cal in 1986. And I'd completely forgotten. Because you're backstage, you're pumping up, you're going over your routine in your mind, you're doing all this stuff. And I remember they called my number, and I went and I kind of went bonk, and I put that foot on stage, and this rush of energy came over me. And I went, oh yeah, that's right. But I hadn't thought about it up until that point. That year, I won the Cal, I won the USA, I won the Nationals, and I won the Universe. All in 1 year. And that had never been done before. And I was tired, believe me, by the end of that in Singapore. But because of what that connection, that grounding, that internal voice did for me, changed everything. Even though I'd been doing well, this was the next step. This was the next level, was the mind.
So you unleashed the inner cat.
The inner cat, yes, I did. And it was really shocking coming from my background. And it was also eye-opening because we'd been taught to be low level, to not be seen, to fly under the radar. So for me to be on stage at Madison Square Garden in front of 5,000 people was the antithesis of anything I'd been taught. So it really opened up for me how important the mind is, how much you project, even like that. Can you run faster with the mind? Yes. Can you lift more with the mind? Yes. Can you project? Yes. And that's what we're at the SEC group, what everybody is trying to understand is how can we harness that? How can we use that at will? How can we teach this to people? And that's why it's so exciting to be part of this.
What were the mechanisms or the philosophies or the approach that you used to unleash that inner cat, to metamorphosize yourself from the shy girl who didn't want to be on stage to the starlet, if you will, of the bodybuilding world? What was the impetus? How did it transform?
You know, I think it was the ability to shapeshift, to absolutely step outside of myself. The first 2 weeks after I started lifting weights, I saw change in my body. And I was a tiny little girl. I was under 100 pounds most of my life. When I saw that muscle, it was empowering because I was like, oh my gosh, look at what's possible. This is crazy. This is shape-shifting. I have this control that I didn't know I had. And that really blew me out of the water, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally and spiritually. It opened up everything this sport really opened up things for me to keep blossoming out. Once I got on stage, it's like I was a different person. I got to step out of myself. I got to act. You know, and I was still shy off stage, but up there, it's a different animal. Different animal.
And you really entered a world that prior to the times that you were coming of age as a bodybuilder was a male dominant or male exclusive club. Now speak to the fact that women now kind of emancipated, if you will, in that you can do anything that a guy can do in the sense of you want to be this profession, you want to pursue this career, this path, whatever. It's more challenging probably still to this day for a woman to achieve the same heights as men in many conventional circles. But speak to the female side of you that had to, you know, overcome obstacles and eclipse hurdles that most guys would never even have to deal with.
You know, I will say that I think for the most part, we were really welcomed into the gyms. I can't say that I had to face any kind of male dominance in the gyms. I think that in the sport, that the guys were really excited to see, you know, women in the gym. I didn't face that. I personally did not. And now, the women are more impressive than the men because they're tiny little mighty mites. They're incredible. I mean, I've got girls who work for me who are in their early 20s, late teens, who are deadlifting, you know, 250 pounds. It's amazing. They're squatting, you know, 250. And they're little, tiny girls. And one of the things that I've always said is, you know, what's so funny watching them is that they're too ignorant to know they should be able to do that. But look at what a great thing that is. They just don't see the limitation. They're excited. They're really excited to lift weight because it does empower them. It makes them stronger. It makes them not a victim walking down the street. It's been the most wonderful thing to see that now we actually have almost more women pumping iron than we do men. And it's very cool.
What do you attribute their strength to? If you say they're little mighty mites, they're 100 and 110 pounds, they're lifting twice their weight and they're deadlifting more. What are you harnessing? What are you tapping into?
I think there's a few reasons for women getting so strong now. One of them being that, like I said, they don't know any better. We have gotten this, you know, we're never going to catch up to men. I shouldn't say that. I won't say that. Men's physiology by nature is always going to be, you know, that they're stronger. But there's a lot of girls in the gym that are stronger than a lot of the guys. So that's part of it. They don't see the limitations. The other part of it is I truly believe that we are changing. We are evolving physiologically. You look at kids now that are practically out of the womb picking up an iPhone and going, you know, figuring it out. You look at kids' kinesthetic sense, you know, flipping snowmobiles and doing all these crazy things that we would have never even thought were possible, let alone attempt. I was trying to think of where I read this. It was talking about even how we've changed in our physiology. And that even 100 years ago, something like driving here with cars doing 80 and 85 miles an hour this close to one another would have been impossible only 100 years ago. Our brains wouldn't have been able to handle that. So that's how quickly we're evolving. It's not just because we have freeways. It's literally we are changing. We're evolving, both in brain and in body. And I really think that that's what's happening with these girls. You're starting to see the gap with running, marathons. That has been closing over years. That now women's and men's times are getting closer. So you're starting to see it in sport. It's a kind of an interesting way that this is coming out. And where that ends, I'm not sure.
And the whole girl power, literally, in the lifting and the sculpting of the body, has benefits far beyond the physical. And can you speak to that? I mean, you've spent a lifetime, racking this iron, heavy iron, and the benefits that is provided to you beyond the physical.
Those benefits for me have been a lot of meditation. It's really a moving meditation. That's what I've brought this sport to for me. My native teachers talked about sitting meditation. We always hear about sitting meditation, sitting quietly, not moving, quiet room, this and that. That's great. For someone with my energy level, that doesn't work. And what do? We beat ourselves up over it. What my native teachers taught me was, no. You don't need a sitting meditation. You need a moving meditation. And what I realized is that is my hour or my hour and a half every day. That is the only time that my attention is so laser focused that I don't think about the home, the dogs, money, anything else, the business. I think only have this communication with my body, which is single focused. So for me, it is my meditation time. And that helps me to move through my day, every day, a lot better than I could have had I not had that meditation for me. Because for me, sitting is just not going to happen. It's just not. I'm too busy-minded. But this I've honed to such a science that it's all I have this beautiful, wonderful conversation with my body while I'm in process, while I'm in set. And that's a wonderful place to be. And to this day, 37 years later, I still find new little things, new little tricks, and feel my body in this aha moment. Oh my gosh, I didn't know I could do that. So that's what it's done for me. It's opened up everything. It really has. It saved my life, because I really don't know that I'd be here if I hadn't found it. I really don't.
Can you elaborate on that?
Anyone who's come out of a cult could tell you how devastating that is, to lose your entire family, your entire social system. I was lucky to find this only 5 short years after that. And it gave me the ability to focus. It gave me somewhere to put my energy in a really beneficial way. I didn't know at that time how profound it would be. But it really brought me into a good sense of myself, into a good sense of possibilities, and that there were no limitations on the future. It allowed me to live in a much better way than a cloistered, limited sense, which is where my family wanted me to be. So for me, it was a lifesaver, because being in that cloistered place for me would have killed me eventually. It wasn't in my being. Maybe it was in my parents' being. Maybe it's in my brother's being. But for me, it wasn't. And if I didn't find this outlet, if I hadn't found what it feels like to be physical, to really, really excel at something, to believe that I could, I don't know where I'd be. I really don't.
Is it safe to say that maybe when you first started, you were pushing weight like pushing away the pain, and then it transformed to something far different and more life-affirming and positive over time?
Again, I think what happened for me was that empowerment, that sense of empowerment, pushing that iron and not letting it beat you was incredible. So it probably did relate to me not wanting to be controlled, not wanting to have anybody tell me what I could or could not do. So pushing that iron was a way of breaking through those barriers. Yeah, you can't control me. I'm not going to let my body control me. Not in that way. I'm going to try to talk to it and have a conversation and see if I can get past it. And it just was really incredible for me. Just incredible. Like I said, that feeling, and you know what? The guys were great with that, with encouraging you. You just benched 100 pounds. Can you believe that? You just benched 100 pounds. No, I can't. That's incredible. Where will it go from here? So it was, in a sense, of me controlling. I think it was a sense of control for me, that I was in charge, that I could shapeshift, that I could push this weight. And I wasn't in control before.
So it became empowering, and then again, the ancillary benefits, because your confidence, your indomitable spirit was awakened, if you will, and all the things that ensued sounded like it just catapulted you.
It did. It was a snowball rolling down a hill. That's how I felt. I felt that people say, you always wanted to be a bodybuilder. No, never thought about it. You know, my mother told me I should have been happy just cleaning toilets. That's what I was told. So for me, it was more experimentation. Then the next thing happened. It was like, oh, I'll go over there. Oh, and it literally it had its own force. I felt like I wasn't directing it as much as things were coming to me, and I just took the opportunities. It was a snowball rolling down a hill, getting bigger and bigger and faster.
So you didn't feel like you were being pushed as much as you were being pulled? Well,
I was definitely...
Say it in your words.
Yeah, I'm sorry. To be honest, it did feel like I was not being pushed into it. I was being pulled. I was being attracted magnetically to it. And it was pretty much unstoppable at that point in time. Then when it came to time to quit, it was just as strong. It was just as strong. I decided to quit bodybuilding competitively, but I swore I would never quit bodybuilding, because that is the one thing that I can do till the end of my days. But it was just that intuitive. Quitting was the same way. It was just, we're done. And it was fantastic.